Welcome to another episode of the Thinking Through Making podcast, where I interview other creatives and makers about their life and work. On this episode we have Blatnaid Gallagher. Blatnaid has a flock of Galway sheep. She started the Galway Wool Co-op and she is a farm and furniture ambassador, and she farms regeneratively. So we talk all things about Galway sheep and agriculture and the state of the Irish wool industry. So if you like the sound of that, keep watching.
Tell us a bit about yourself then and your background with sheep in general, but the Galway breed in particular. Tell us a wee bit about that and how that all came about.
Okay, well, thanks, Emma, for taking the opportunity to support our little fledgling group of volunteers. And I suppose I'm kind of like, I suppose I'm a city girl turned farmer, even though my parents both came from farms. I was reared in Galway City, and I did at 16 go to an agricultural college. So 30 years later, some of that education did come to fruition, which was great. But I came to the farm through inheritance, which I am very, very grateful for. Now, people say you work for your inheritance. So we really, both myself and my husband Niall, had to work for this inheritance because my uncle was a hoarder. He was my mother's brother, and the farm came down through my maternal lines. So he was a hoarder, which meant that every single thing he could possibly collect, he did. And that included animals, cars, trailers, pallets. We've all driven through the countryside and we've seen these places, and you're trying to figure out, are they junkyards? Are they dumps? Are they collectors? Well, this was one of those. So along with that, the grassland management on the farm, which is over 100 acres, had deteriorated slightly. Now, it had deteriorated in the sense that there was a lot of noxious weeds. But I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'm a Farming for Nature ambassador for 2024. So part of the work that I do here is that I farm with and in tandem with nature. So weeds can be a good thing because they're wonderful for the pollinators, but they reach a certain level where they can be an infringement on your neighbours' grassland management. And I needed to just do something in tandem with nature to knock back the amount of noxious weeds. So I spoke to a neighbour, and the neighbour said, why don't you get some Galways? And I looked at him and said, well, I mean, Galway, obviously I'm going to get Galway sheep. And he said to me, you haven't heard of our Irish native breed, have you? And I went, no. And he said, well, the native breed, which is a lowland white sheep, the predominant sheep breed that was here before we started importing meat breeds and Mountainese, was called the Galway. And she's a very docile sheep, and you're new to farming. So with respect, I think you should consider them. And by the way, they've got great wool. Year one, got 5, loved them, very docile, beautiful, beautiful sheep, big, snowy white sheep. They're quite large. Brought the wool to the local depot and said to them, walked in, cock at the walk in. I went with my 5 fleeces, and they looked at me and I said, this is Galway fleece, thinking I was going to get, a red carpet laid out for this woman coming in with her 5 Galway fleece. And your man looked at me and he went, throw it down the back of the yard there, will you, and wait. So I think I got less than €1, I think. It was just something incredible. And I, hands and hips, walked out and went, disgraceful. At the same time, my mum wasn't well, and I was entitled to go back to college because I was her carer. And I went back and did a master's in agricultural innovation at the National University of Ireland. And part of my research there was about the crisis within the wool industry. Now, there's no crisis in the Irish woolen industry. It's doing very well. Both our exports and our national markets are brewing with merino wool. But the Irish wool crisis was the same as it was over in the UK, with sheep farmers dumping wool because they couldn't find a market for it, and that the existing markets had let us down, or we hadn't kept our eye on the existing markets. So I discovered all this at college, and I just said, I'm going to do something about this, and I'm going to make our native breed the wool that was originally used in the iconic Aran sweater, which I suppose in essence was really the fibre stone, or the base fibre for which our craft, our internationally renowned Irish craft and design has sprung from. I said, this is the wool. I have it on my farm. I knew there wasn't that much of it. And it's important that people realise that, it will always be rare. It will always be difficult to get because there are only 1,000 breeding females between here and the UK. So it's never going to be as abundant as merino or, even the rarer breeds that are coming to fore now. Like Galway has a lot to do to try and increase its numbers back again. And it was so sad. At one point in time, Emma, Europe came knocking on the door and said to the Irish government, do you realise that your native sheep breed is actually on our endangered species list? Because at that point, there were less than 400 of them in the world. So this iconic sheep with this abundant of snowy white wool that was the base fibre for the Irish craft and design industry was now on the extinction list. And I just thought, no. I was a bit of madness, a bit of heritage, a bit of passion, a bit of pride, and a huge spoonful of wanting to do the right thing for these Irish sheep farmers, and especially the shepherds of this beautiful snowy breed, said to me, right, here you go, you're in midlife. Unfortunate we didn't have a family, really tried very hard. Mother Nature and luck wasn't on our side. I had time on my hands and I said, this is my new baby, this is my new family, and this is my new ambition. I am going to do everything I can to restore the cultural integrity of this beautiful native Irish grown wool. Here I am today, chatting to you.
Brilliant. That's quite an amazing story. So is that the beginnings of how the Galway Wool Co-op started then? Can you tell us a bit
exactly so
why that's, well, obviously you kind of told us why, but tell us a wee bit more about the Galway Wool Co-op.
Okay, so the co-op is made up of members of this association, and the association is called the Galway Sheep Breeders Association. So they're the custodians of the flock book. And another beautiful thing, not only are people getting an opportunity to work with a very rare heritage Irish wool, but that wool actually has provenance going back 101 years. So when you pick up a skein of bawneen, or, even a cone, or however you're working with it, whether it's with needlecraft or whether it's in felting or tufting or love it. We call that gloss, which is from white to gloss. It's beautiful. You have amazing talent, girl, by the way. I'm sure an awful lot of your followers are looking at you going, how does she do it? It's just magical what you've done with those colours, and I'm sure you've seen the reaction that has come to the little teaser we've done. It is just magical, the amount of people who are eager. So the co-op, we needed to find a buyer, which we were very grateful. Donegal Yarns, who are based in the northwest of Ireland and are already handling 3 or 4 different types of Irish wools, said to us, look, we love this story. How are we going to get our hands on this wool? And I said, you know what I'll do? I'll form a co-op, because the scale at which Donegal Yarns are at, they're supplying international markets all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we knew that rocking up to them with 50 kilos wasn't their business model, and it wasn't going to be something that they'd entertain. They're not there. There are places in the world for that. So I said, I'll do a shout out to our members on the Galway Sheep Breeders Association, and I'll see, can I form a co-op? And they were really keen, because farmers and, wool growers in general, they're used to that cooperative model. It's been a business model that's been around for hundreds of years. So it was in the middle of the big COVID, and I had a captive audience. It was it was akin to shooting goldfish in a bowl, because nobody could go anywhere. All they could do was turn on their cameras and listen to your one raving every Tuesday night about this new co-op she was going to form. So it was great for me, because nobody could say they were gone to gymnastics or hockey or hurling or anything like that. Everyone was around, So we got 7 of us got together, and it included a couple of families. We have 3 or 4 COVID babies as well. And we set up the co-op, and we enticed the members from the association to become members of the cooperative as well. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is, we really feel that authenticity and lineage and provenance is tantamount to how this, our wool growers in all over the world are going to survive. Because what I've discovered since COVID is that a lot of people, especially crafters, are they really want to get back to earth. They really want to get that land into their hand. Mm-hmm. And, if we're going to do that, we need to have traceability. And in order to have the traceability, what we do is, if you're not a member of the association, we don't know where your wool is coming from. But if you are a member of the association, we know then that you've got the 100% fully pedigree, registered Irish Galway, the true native wool. So we're not diluting what we're promising to do. Mm-hmm. So we take our members from the association, and the plan long term is that the members in the UK would also be able to become members of our association, get their sheep registered through sheep.ie. And then we have this traceability. And that's why it's so important to us that if you're in the co-op, we need to have traceability right back to the big database of sheep, so that we know when we go to Donegal Yarns, everything in those sacks that is eventually landing with you, Emma, is traceable back to the farm, back to the family farm, whether they be in Donegal or whether they be in South Kerry, that those people are being rewarded for doing the paperwork around the registration, minding the fleece, presenting it very clean. And most importantly, for some of them, making a 5 and 6 hour round trip to Athenry to drop off their fleeces at the annual Mehel. So that's what we do. We collect the fleeces at one big, huge harvest, and it occurs on the third Saturday in July. And it's in Athenry, which is in County Galway, because it's convenient. It's just off the motorway. And we're very fortunate there that the Mart give us this brilliant new state-of-the-art enclosed area where we can collect the wool, inspect it, weigh it, and then put it on the lorry and get it ready for collection by whoever the buyer is. And we've had Donegal Yarns for 2 years. We're in negotiations with them again. Hopefully they'll be able to buy from us again this year. And with the incredible support that we get from your followers and your customers, that's what encourages Donegal Yarns to come back and say, okay, we'll spin another 5,000 kilos. And we're totally dependent. We don't do spinning. We're farmers. We produce wool. We produce it with pride and with passion. But we're very dependent on partnerships, collaborations, supporters, followers. We're very dependent on a growing movement from the ground up. You know, from the people who are sitting at home watching this with the needles between their hands, or one crochet needle, or whatever they choose, whatever their needlecraft art form is. You're actually really part of the story. You're a huge part of the story, because if that gra, which is an Irish word for love, if that love for all things natural and all things of provenance, of true provenance, really means something, well, then this cooperative will be around for hundreds of years to come, and it will be a testament to the people like yourself who've said, we want to really, really connect with the land, connect with the actual fibre from the sheep itself, and make that into something beautiful. And that's what the co-op is all about. It's about reaching out to both the suppliers and to the supporters to ensure that we all work together and make sure that this fleece continues to be as iconic as it was 70, 80 years ago, when it was a huge part of the yarn sweater.
That's really interesting, Blatnaid. I have a few things I'm interested to pick up on what you just said there. First of all, you said 5,000 kilos. Am I right in thinking that's all there is available in the whole world right
Correct. Now? Absolutely. And when you think about it, there are probably, in New Zealand alone, they produce 250 million tons of wool. So when you think about it, we're talking about 5,000 kilos. It's a really small amount. And there's another lovely Irish word or phrase. It's called an rud is anam is iontuch. I'll repeat that again. An rud is anam is iontuch. And what that effectively means is what's where is wonderful. And that makes this beautiful snowy white wool even more special. I don't know if you can see Myra there. Myra is taking her time to give birth to triplets. And that's why she's in here with me today. Can you see her? I'm conscientious of moving the camera now in case we lose connectivity again. So that's Moira. Say hello. Yeah, so she at the moment is probably up at about 110 kilos. We'll come back to the wool now in a minute, but when I get them in camera, it's just nice to be able to share their story as well. So she's a dote. She's a little dote. So go back to the wool again. Yes, there's only 5,000 kilos available in the world right now. And there are probably unregistered Galways around Ireland and the UK. Well, there's definitely unregistered Galways that are with the Breeders' Association, but we can't guarantee their provenance.
Yeah.
So if you're paying a premium and if you're desperate to get your hands on something that's as authentic and real as this, I kind of believe that we should give the bells and whistles with it, that the registration of the sheep and their lineage and their pedigree needs to go with that. Otherwise, you end up diluting everything, and the end user doesn't know what they're working with, which has happened time and time again within the craft of the wool sector. You don't know what you're ending up with. Is it Irish wool made from merino, or is it merino wool? There's a lot of ambiguity there around what's Irish and what's not. So, yeah, and it's the first of its kind that this has been done. There are other people in Ireland that are making wool from fleece, but this is the first time that a movement of farmers have got together and said, we're actually going to do something for ourselves about this. And working with the native breed that's been around the country for so long it's brilliant. So thanks for highlighting that.
Okay. Another question I had was about the mehel. I hope I said that right.
You did?
Whole, concept of that. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about that, because not everyone will know what that is, and it's quite special, I think.
It is. Yeah, it is. So the mehel, first of all, we'll start with the word. The word mehel means a lot of things, but I suppose if you translate it, it means people working with their hands together, mehel. And traditionally in the countryside, farmers always helped each other out before the establishment of contractors and the idea of picking up the phone and asking a guy to come and cut your hay or cut your corn or shear your sheep even. Before that, it was always neighbours helping neighbours. That was a very important part of the countryside, all over the world, not just here in Ireland. And they would have a mehel. And a mehel was usually around harvest time. So when you were harvesting your corn or your barley or your straw or your wool, somebody would come and assist you. So when we were setting up the mehel, and I knew that I was going to have to bring people from, as I said earlier, hours of driving. We have a girl that comes down from Carandunna. She travels 3.5 hours, drops her fleece, and drives back up again. So she leaves around 4:30 and she's back at her farm again, like later in that afternoon, just because she does not want to see her wool being pulled away into the Asian carpet markets out the other side of the world. So, so the mehel is tea, coffee, squashy buns, Cayley music, a local Cayley band, people that I met just down through the years that really are so passionate about what we're doing also. And they said, we want to be part of this. And I'm going, okay. So it isn't officially a public event yet because I'm not an event manager. As I said, I'm a sheep farmer, I'm a wool grower. But I can see it going that way. There was such huge interest last year because we had the first of its kind meeting of hands. So we have an artist in residence. Her name is Michelle Hickey-Leger. And Michelle is a student down in the Limerick School of Art and Design. And she came on board last year and she said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could display all the various types of artwork that you can do using Galway as a medium? And I said, absolutely, that would be fabulous. Off you go. And she did. And she did a shout out to all the artists. We had about 16 exhibitors and she displayed them in the most amazing way in between the various sheep pens. And she had an agricultural twist on every item that was on display. And people came from all over. We didn't even open it to the public. The public just arrived, Emma. There was people just everywhere. I see you. There was people everywhere just coming to see what can we do with this beautiful Irish fibre. So we had needlecraft, we had felting, we had tufting. We even had this amazing dream catcher, which was made out of Galway. Oh, it was amazing. If the followers want to go online and they look up at Galway Wool Co-op, they can look up the mehel and it'll actually show you some of the exhibits that were there last year. So once we found a buyer for the clip this year, we're going to arrange another mehel and we're definitely going to do another call out for people who are interested in just displaying their works. Now, the caveat is please use Galway. I'm not here to support the whole international wool scene. I'm only one girl being able to do one job, and that is to try and work with this particular breed. And hopefully that will trickle down to all wool everywhere throughout the UK and Ireland and throughout the world, because there's a lot of breeds out there outside of merino. And unfortunately, I think we've become quite dependent on merino. Naturally, it's such a brilliant wool. That's why there's a gravitas towards it. But how it's been how it's been grown and how those farmers are being rewarded is getting very loose. And that's why I'm conscientious that we keep with the mehel and that we keep the farmers themselves bringing the wool to one central location, make it as interesting as possible for them on the day, and hopefully work towards having it as a public event so that people can actually come. A lot of the artists and the needlecrafters that were there last year were just gobsmacked. They had never seen wool in the grease. They didn't know what it looked like. Yeah, it's amazing. Now, more than milk comes from supermarkets, we're all guilty of not knowing where particular fibres come from. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, everybody's not supposed to know everything. I mean, nobody's perfect in this world.
Yeah, not everybody's a farmer.
Everybody, yeah, not everybody's a farmer. But what I do say to people is, if you come to the mehel, just leave the farmers do their thing, because there'll be a lot of heavy transport there, and the boys are just bringing it in, and the women are bringing it in their trailers and their tractors and their cars. And, we unload it there. And then to see, there's something lovely about seeing people work in unison and, to see them all getting together. And remember, nobody's been paid. Like, I make the tea and sandwiches myself here the night before, and friends will come and they'll divvy them out. A very funny thing happened the last 2 years running was that I started making tea and sandwiches, and I'd have another lovely lady called Mary Glynn who gives us a hand. And we make them for the workers, because that's traditionally what you got at a mehel. You got to help your neighbour and you got a bit of grub. Mm-hmm. But you look at what all the bystanders were coming along and eating up the sandwiches and the teas and the coffees. And by the time the lads were finished all the work, I have my arms around a tray of sandwich going, help, help, this is for the workers. But, it's very relaxed. Come with an open mind and don't be put it this way, if you come, you work. There's nobody there on Mehel Day to entertain or mind somebody else.
Yes.
You're there because your heart is in the right place. And a lot of people just want to see where greasy wool comes from and how it's presented. And presentation of wool at the Mehel is very important. Unfortunately, farmers, because they're being paid so little as 20 cents a kilo, or 20 pence a kilo even in the north, they're putting a lot of bad stuff in with the wool, as in the poo and the straw and the hay and all the stuff that you don't want in your wool. So we inspect the wool that comes from our farmers, and we ensure that there's no dags, there's no vegetable matter, and that it's presented and rolled in a very traditional way. So there's a lot of tradition involved with the Mehel. So watch this space. Yeah, if we know that we've got a buyer for this year, 2024, and once we have the I's dotted and the T's crossed, we let the world know that the Mehel 2024 is coming, and hopefully we'll be able to make it open to the public as well, which would be lovely.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the whole concept, because I think that's a countryside thing, because I grew up seeing that. So there's this man that came and cut the hedges for my granda and granny. They had a dairy farm, and he was called Wilner, and he just turned up. And in any other place, like in the city, you take a packed lunch, that's what you do. But Wilner turned up, and granny made him dinner every day at 12 o'clock, and he ate with everybody. And that's just
that's so lovely.
That's just part of the thing. So yeah, I can see that still happening. And
it's lovely. And we're restoring that, I suppose, as well. We're restoring the native wool, and now we're restoring that whole idea of a Mehel, but it's important that the farmers are aware that they're getting. So just to let the viewers know, we're looking for €2.50 a kilo for these farmers. We do our best to ensure that they get that $2.50 back into their hand. There might be some running costs. The work that I do is all voluntary. So it's the most expensive hobby I've ever had in my life. I'm quite sure that 3 years a golf membership somewhere would have quite happily covered the costs of the diesel and the time that I spend promoting this, but it's a joy. It's a real joy. When you see those farmers rocking up at the Mehel, or when you see people starting to get interested in dual purpose breeds. And if you don't mind, I'll just explain to the viewers a little bit about dual purpose breeds. So traditionally, sheep were kept for their wool. Mm-hmm. Most of the British Empire was founded on the value that the British had for their wool. So they would have exported this wool all over the world and then used that money to build the empire. And I didn't make that up, by the way. That's a well-known fact. So it was a huge, highly valuable commodity worldwide. And in some ways it still is. But Northern Europe has lost its grip on how we market and sell the wool, and we've just rolled over and just said, bring us in the merino, and we're addicted to it now, and we just can't wean ourselves off it. We can't look at the potential for other breeds. Whilst Galway is not ideal for next to skin, I'm sure, Emma, that when we do the big launch, you'll explain that to people. It's not what you'd call it's not a cashmere, it's not a merino, it's a rustic, it's a heritage wool. And we've lost our ability to just work with what we have here in Europe. Mm-hmm. And the lovely thing about it is there are amazing breeds that actually do produce really soft, like your Border Leicester, your Cheviot, your Romney. There are loads of British and Irish breeds. Well, there's only the one Irish, but there's loads of British and European breeds that can actually produce really, what's the other one? The Ram Brûlé. And these are amazing texture. And if we go out and support the farmers that actually have these breeds, we could become quite dependent on our own supply source of wool coming from Europe again, which for me lends itself greatly to sustainability and to the whole, carbon footprint of where our produce comes from. But the beauty of the Galway, and we have Moira back again. Mwah. The beauty of the Galway is, she's back again. So the beauty of the Galway is that she'll produce meat and she'll produce wool. Now, meat production isn't everybody's cup of tea. I'm mindful of the fact that we have a wonderful resurgence in veganism and vegetarianism throughout the world, which is great. And everybody has their choice. But the reality of it is sheep are used for their meat as well. And we took our eye off the ball and we started to produce sheep here in Northern Europe, primarily and only for their meat. Mm-hmm. And that's why the merino has become so popular, is because the merino was being produced for her wool. Mm-hmm. And while we were watching the pounds and pence at Farmgate with how we were going to survive as farmers living off the land, we were looking at protein production and meat production only. We weren't looking at biofibre. So with the introduction and the reintroduction and the resurgence of dual purpose breeding, we're reducing our carbon footprint. And we're making better use of grassland, and we're getting better use of our time on farm. Because ideally, we're going to get paid for the meat that we produce and the wool that we produce. And I think that has got to be a good thing for both biodiversity and sustainability at farm gate level. And that's why it's important that the work that I do, is not fruitless, that it does end up between the needles of crafters, because wool being produced for yarn and being used by people for everything. And I just go back to the uses of the wool again. When I did say it's not ideal for next to skin, there's no reason why it can't be woven into fabric. So there's no reason why, if some of your followers are working off looms, that they can't use that wool for cushion covers. They can't use it for there's a lovely lady called Karina Ryan. She's felting it for lampshades. It can be felted into a lot of different purposes. But if you are knitting it with it, you are crocheting, you can crochet gilet. And I think that's probably one of the most iconic and beautiful purposes that you can put Galway into, is to use it as a gilet with an undergarment, so that you have your shirt or you have your cotton tee or you have something underneath your gilet, or as a cardigan where you're wearing something underneath the cardigan. Let's not constantly focus on the fact that it's not next to skin. Not all of us wear our woolen sweaters next to skin anyway. And I kind of, ironically, the Irish sweater was an outdoor garment. Did you know that? When the Irish sweater was being knit originally, the women were knitting it for their men folk to go out fishing and to use the lanolin in it as a waterproof and water resistant fibre for the wool. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to mention, that it's not next to skin, but it's perfect for stitch definition. And if anybody's interested in working with cables, and using their skills as crafters to work with design in the knitting itself, this wool is amazing. It's just, to get your hands on something that's so rustic and so structured and so rare, it's fabulous that there's people like you out there, Emma, making it available to crafters.
And you know what, Blatnaid, it's yes, people are very quick to say, oh, it's not next to skin, but I look at it in a different way. It has character, it has structure, it stands up better, it is hard wearing, like there's loads of positive qualities about it, and the whole provenance of it as well, like that's so important. And the people who like the yarns that I already produce, they're interested in that. So yeah, to me it's not like, it's just, I was talking to Willie Smith about this, and he described it as in a league of its own, and you can't compare it like to all those other things. Like it's just not the same thing at all. So yeah, I don't think that should put people off.
Don't get me wrong, I think merino is probably one of the most versatile wools that there are out there. But when you look at people trying to stitch Aran sweaters with merino, or if you happen to buy an Aran sweater that comes from either acrylic or merino, it's not the same thing, Emma. It's not the same thing. It's like, it's almost like a droopy boob.
So true. Yes.
No, Bradley. I know this has been recorded. Please edit that out. I'm going to leave it in. I don't mind. But it's like, I know, Bradley. It's like everything just droops. Do you know what I mean? It's like a droopy eyelid. Like, and then when you see it with a rustic and a heritage yarn, and I know that you've been passionate about heritage yarns for years now. It's when you see that in an Aran or a cable, that's when you kind of go, oh, wow, that's what cables are supposed to look like. And this is coming from a sheep farmer who's only just learning. But, I am curious about this wonderful craft and the people that you represent. I just think it's amazing. And I'm really, really keen to learn more. So I shut up when I listen to what you have to say. Sorry, I'm a bit of a gabber.
No, that's nice. I love the chat. So could you tell us a wee bit about the actual sheep breed, what their temperament's like? Where they sit in history, like the context of them, because I was doing a wee bit of research and you said they're about 100, the breed has about 100 years of, I don't know what you would say, it's been going for
provenance,
about 100 years. So could you tell me, because during my research I seen it would have been like the original Dishley Leicester, which was bred by well. So can you tell me a wee bit about that and how that all filters through to the Galway?
Interesting, brilliant. Yeah, so Lord Bakewell was the one who put these breeds together. And there was a bit of the Leicester. There's actually, believe it or not, a bit of Merino. So he put 4 breeds together and he made what he called a super breed, and he called it a Roscommon. And that sheep actually went out to Australia. Isn't it ironic that we're importing wool from Australia now, and we actually exported the original Galway out to Australia? Because I suppose it's the abundance of wool that she was creating at the time, that she was growing at the time. So she grows up to 5 kilos a year. That's a lot of wool. So your average sheep is probably going to give you somewhere between 1 kilo and 3 kilos. And the merino, the really soft merino, is only going to give you half a kilo. But she grows this abundance of wool, and it's got this long white staple on it. And he knew at the time the value of wool. Like, he knew that he was onto a good thing here, because he had, as far as he was concerned, created the best breed in the world. She was strong. And Micron didn't come into things back then, remember. Like, they weren't interested in the softer wools. They just wore what they had. So in actual fact, strong wools would have been what they were interested in, because they were looking for durability, and the obvious thing, they were looking for strength. But they wanted strength and durability. So this breed was exported out to Australia and around the world, and it became hugely popular. And then the Roscommon sheep farmers decided, well, it's so popular now, we'll have a little pedigree class. So it's like, if you're familiar with horses, people tend to show their horses at various different times of the year. So these boys started showing their sheep at an event in Dublin called the Royal. It'd be kind of like the Balmoral show. So it'd be a huge show that's every year. Yeah. So they started showing their sheep. And this was fantastic, because it was the first time that a native breed here in Ireland was actually being showcased. But sadly, they lost either the ambition or the will, or maybe they were just distracted with a lot of things that were going on here in Ireland at that time. And they stopped recording that beautiful breed, and they stopped. So all recognition for the breed disappeared. And then 101 years ago, no, the breed was still here. It was all over Ireland, and in the UK. And at this stage, it had gone down to the Southern Hemisphere. So a group of farmers in Athenry in County Galway, there was a gap. There was a gap there of about 20 years where there was no record. And the boys in Athenry said, gosh, the Roscommon lads haven't done anything for a long, long time. I think we need to really recognise the fact that this is a fabulous breed. And the only way to encourage good breeding is to keep what they call pedigree records. So you look and see who the father and the mother are. And they would have done an awful lot of work with the sires, who are called rams. So rams that were producing the best offspring and the best wool would have been recorded down, and everybody would have wanted that ram siring over their flocks. So they started to work on the pedigree, and at that point in time, she became known as Galway. And she was then officially recognised by the state, probably around about 1950, 1960. They decided at that point in time that we needed to recognise this breed, which was all over Ireland, all over the limestone plains of Ireland. And limestone plains are generally where you find sheep farmers. And then the state recognised this lowland breed and this breed society as the official native breed of Ireland. So right now, she's the only one that's officially recognised. And a lot of that has got to do with the gallant work that the breeders in the association have done. So you can set up an association in the morning, but to have an association recognised by the state takes a huge amount of work and administration and records. And anybody who's ever set up a business will know what's involved. It's not as easy as just opening the door and turning on the cash register, but like, there's a lot of work involved. And these farmers that are in this Galway Sheep Breeders Association, they really deserve recognition for keeping the breed alive. So go back to the breed again. She's docile, extremely docile. When you walk into a field, the Galways will look at you rather than run away from you. So a lot of Galway sheep farmers don't bother keeping sheepdogs. You don't need them. You just really call them. So for me, I don't call them now because there's some outside and they'll start coming in. But I used to go here, 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 or come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, and they will come to you. They know that they're either moving a field or that you're going to give them a little bit of. I feed them a small, tiny bit of organic meal at this time of the year because they're all in lamb, and I just want to keep their sugar levels and I want to keep them just in better health than they possibly could be. So they're large. They are about 80 kilos in weight. So they're a big sheep. Their wool is very white. So there's no grey, browns, blacks. There's nothing running through the wool, only this long white fibre. And there's a fleece length, there's a staple length, I think that's what I call it. The staple length can be anywhere from 6 to 10 inches, depending on how well you're looking after your wool. And What we have done here, I suppose, within the association is we haven't been concentrating on wool quality. Since we started the co-op, what we're trying to do is encourage a best fleece competition every year. So the farmers will bring a fleece to the Mehel, and they'll keep that aside from what we're selling. And we have inspectors, so we have people who are from the industry looking at this fleece. And what we do is we reward them with a gift. So the person that brings in the best fleece, and then that person then goes on to be known as the person who had the best wool. So when people are looking to buy sheep the following year, hopefully they go to that person. And that encourages us in our own small way to try and increase the quality and to bring back, possibly reduce the microns slightly without taking away from the strength of the wool. And also to ensure that crimp is as long and the staple can be as long as possible, because that's what the spinners all want.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So obviously to have good fibre, maybe this is too generalized as a statement, but the sheep need to be eating the right stuff, and you need to have good soil and good grass. So can you tell me a bit about your approach to farming and grass management? Would you call it
Yeah.
management?
Yeah. No, you're just brilliant.
How that then affects how the sheep are. So obviously as well, like these are not animals that are generally inside. They're not, like cattle would be inside a lot more than sheep. Obviously, like hens are like nearly all kept inside, but sheep can't be kept inside apart from maybe at lambing time. So can you tell us a wee bit about that whole process, a bit of the background and how you farm?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm actually a Farming for Nature ambassador for this year. So for me, it's very important that I choose a breed that's able to stay outside all year long. And I think that's where sheep are actually at their happiest. But sadly, in order for a sheep to produce fine wool, they need to be under stress. So that's another thing that we need to be mindful of. And probably part of the reason why these girls have produced such strong wool is because they're probably the happiest sheep in the world. They live outdoors on a grass-based system. So they have ad lib a multi-species sward, which is full of flowers and herbs and natural medicine basically going into their system every single day. And then in the winter time, when the grasses roundabout now is really bad, they've lost all their sugars. I'm looking out at the moment, it's actually snowing. So I supplement their diet with organic hay. So organic hay is basically grass that was harvested during the summer and just let to dry. So it's like basically eating dried apricots or dried fruit. The grass is dried out. And then I supplement that then with an organic meal, which is made up of lots, again, of nutritious elements and minerals that they would need that they're not getting from the grass at this time of the year. But when they're not getting supplements such as hay or organic meal, they're out on grass. So the grass that they're eating and the soil that grass is grown on is actually what's producing your wool. Mm-hmm. So, if you're somebody who's using the wool that you produce, Emma, and you're living in, we'll say, Nova Scotia, or you're living in Massachusetts, or you're somewhere in France, it's lovely to think that the soil here in Ireland produced grass that the sheep loved and ate and thrived on. And that grass produced the wool that grew so strong. And the reason why sheep have strong wool is because it's because they're happy. And a lot of farmers will know the condition of their sheep based on the look of the wool. So if a sheep isn't well, if a sheep is sick, they will actually know the colour will change. It'll become quite loose. Sometimes it'll start to fall out. And unfortunately, sheep being kept in very, very hot, humid conditions is a reason why their wool becomes so fine. And it's akin to ourselves. I mean, you've often known somebody who's been sick and they'd say, oh God, my hair fell out. Or, even women during pregnancy, they'll often say that the condition of their hair will change because of the hormones and because of how they're feeling. So in some ways, the more I talk about it, the more I realise the stronger the wool, the happier the sheep. And the more diverse the diet that they're on, because sheep don't want to be eating the same thing every day. Sheep are foragers. They want the weeds, which is great. So there are few animals that actually go out there and eat docks, which are the bane of everybody's life. So they love multi-species sward, which we have here. So a holistic approach and a regenerative approach to agriculture is tantamount on my particular farm. And you find with a lot of the Galway breeders, they tend to be, smaller flocks. They tend to be approaching this with caution because they may have other enterprises on the farm and they're just bringing in the Galways now to see how the wool is going to go. Or they might be just enthusiasts, or they might be just people who are passionate about rare breeds. So you'll find that the flocks are quite small. Unlike when you go to the southern hemisphere, there could be maybe 40, 50,000 sheep on a farm, and they're being shorn on an industrial scale, which can cause its own bad animal husbandry practices themselves. Here in Ireland, you could have a farmer with 5 Galways, just like me when I started off, and those 5 sheep could be akin to family members or pets because they're so docile. It's hard not to, like, my husband doesn't come from a farming background, but we tried mixed breeds here for a while, and he says, oh, well, you go back into the Galways, they were lovely. And I said, what did you like about them? And he said, they were just so quiet and they seemed to be just so intelligent. And I went, oh, that's lovely. So yeah, so there's an intelligence to the breed and there's a docility to the breed, which is very important, and it's what makes people so happy to be around them. And unlike the Mountainese that can run up and down the mountains, these girls aren't in any. They're not going to win any races for speed. Put it that way. So it's easy to work with them.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So there's all these, like, not micro farmers, but it's kind of like maybe it hasn't changed that much than it was like 70 years ago, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, when people had, they had like a couple of pigs, they had a few hens running around, they had a few sheep. It was kind of more like the whole thing was more mixed. Whereas now it's more like mono, like you do one thing. And then the problem with that is then if something goes wrong with that, then you've lost out. That's everything gone. So
I think, Emma, you should give up fibre and just start farming because you have it. That's it. You have it. That's exactly it. Now you've spoke so accurately there. Like, multi enterprises on farms is the way to hold on to biodiversity within the farming homestead, because that's what creates, within this. I mean, I have a lot of chickens here and they roam around, and I know that those chickens are out there breaking up the poo from the ponies and the sheep. Now, when they break up that poo from ponies and the sheep, it makes it easier for the microbes from the soil to go up and pull it down. So if you've got a big poo and you've got all those microorganisms in the soil trying to pull that down to the soil, it doesn't work. But if you've got chickens or crows or any kind of birds that have gone off and they've been tapping at that poo, trying to take the last bit of goodness out of it, that means then that they've almost sieved it. So it's a lot easier for it to be broken down and bring it back in really, really good soil health. Now, that's another story. I'm crisscrossing over into my farming for nature side of things, and I don't know, would I be boring people by adding that in? But having sheep on the farm means that you can have their poo and their pee going into the soil all year round because you're keeping them in an outdoor system. And that means that soil has been fed all year round. But if we fall out of love with sheep here in Northern Europe, which unfortunately is happening, and it could happen throughout the world, because once farmers can't earn a living from what they're producing, they have to consider whether or not it's worth their while producing that particular, whether it be protein or fibre. And already in New Zealand, who are, for me, probably the most amazing wool producers in the world, because they're still doing it at a farm level, that they haven't really crept over into the industrial scale like they have in South Africa, South America, and parts of Australia. So having farms and farmers still interested in what they produce is really, really important. And having a diversity of enterprises on a farm is critical to making, making farming work. As you said, if one fails, at least you can fall back on the other. And right now, for me, wool production and producing biofibre, that's Rosie, by the way. Hello, Rosie. She's a Connemara. I don't want to lose the camera, but she'll come into shot every now and again. So go back to the biodiversity on the farm and the farm diversity. Yeah, it's huge. It's really, really important. And producing biofibre here is really, really important to me, because 1 kilo of wool can sequester up to 2 kgs of carbon from the atmosphere. And I'll say that again. 1 kilo of greasy wool that grows on the sheep can sequester 1.8 kilos. So that's almost 2 kilos of carbon from the atmosphere. And if I'm sequestering carbon from the atmosphere by growing wool, I'm a happy farmer.
Yeah.
I really am. I'm a happy farmer.
That's really interesting. This is totally in my wheelhouse now. I could listen to you talking about this stuff all day. It's so interesting to me. So, like, because obviously that big agriculture is like now come to Ireland, I would say, in some ways. You hear of like robot milking machines and like all these different types of things. So how is that affecting farming culture in Ireland now, would you say? And can we learn anything from looking to the past or how things used to be done?
I think it's affecting, in some ways it's good, because younger people of we say 2020s, they need to be able to say, I can make a really good living out of farming. Because that drives a lot of people to work every day. It's how much they're making. Unfortunately, there are probably less than 10% of people in the world who actually do what they love every day. The other 90% go off and they do what they do because they have to earn a living. And that's the same in farming. There's a lot of people out there that are coming into farming and they need to be able to earn a living. They need to be able to learn the same amount as the local teacher or the local barrister or the local technician. They need to be able to earn a living. And if that means that they have to scale up, well, then that's what they're going to have to do in order to be able to produce the food that we need here day on day on day. I mean, we need food 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But then you have people like myself who just really want to do what they love and cut our cloth to meet the measure. So I would have changed my earnings and my lifestyle considerably to do what I love day after day after day after day after day. So for 365 days a year, I'm a very happy camper doing what I do. But I wouldn't go and have my nails done, and I wouldn't go and have my hair done, and I probably wouldn't eat out as much as I would have in the past. And I love having made those sacrifices because now I don't need to go off and do all those things to make myself happy. I'm just happy every day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But not everybody is in that position.
Yeah.
You might have 2 growing children and they're going to want to go to college and you're going to want to have a basic income of 50 grand a year. So how are you going to do that? You're going to produce food and you're going to produce it as efficiently as possible in order to make sure that those margins are there in your bank account to pay for the college fees and to pay for the mortgage, the electricity and all the bills coming in. So I think it's a little bit utopian to think that we could all stay at a level whereby we've got the type of farming system that I have going here, and at the same time be ambitious about producing food efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a fine balance. There is a fine balance, and if we market our food as green food, luscious food, reared in tandem with nature, well then I think there needs to be more of me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? But if we're going to produce mass food and if the consumer wants cheap food and they want it regularly, and they want consistency in that, well, then the consumer has to be aware of how that food is being produced. And I think if we had more openness and honesty, including what's going on in wool, I mean, if people really knew where acrylic wool came from, it comes from an oil rig. That's where acrylic wool comes from. If people really knew that most of the merino, which is such a fabulous wool, and I have to stress that, came from industrial scale farms where the cow, God forbid, but they do actually count the dead sheep, not the live ones, because there's so many of them in order to feed the addiction to merino around the world. And likewise, if people realised that the milk that they drink came from a cow by a robot, would that affect their purchasing decisions?
Mm.
And if it does, well, then there's going to be plenty of farmers like me in the world. But right now, the consumer, some of them don't even know where the milk comes from.
Mm.
And education is going to have a huge part in that, Emma. And I think your generation and the post-COVID generation, who have more of a curiosity and interest in where things come from, will be able to support my style of farming and more people like me.
Mm-hmm.
But that hasn't happened yet. That really hasn't happened yet. And I think a lot of happy governments are happy because when food is cheap, generally the mass population is happy. And if you were to start making food expensive by rewarding farmers like me for doing what I do on a small scale, well, then you're going to have a very disruptive population in any country around the world. And that's not conducive to government policies. So,
yeah.
Sorry, we're going off on a tangent here now,
Yeah,
but
no,
that's just
so interesting to me because, like, I grow some of my own food, and to me, that's not cheap. And I won't waste any of that because for months and months, I've grown that and nurtured it and looked after it. And there's no way any of it's going in the bin.
Well, food waste is huge. I did part of my dissertation at college was actually about food waste and the amounts of it around the world. And I think if we were to be more mindful of the amount of food, I mean, the privilege of working on a farm here when you have geese is that nothing goes to waste. So all our food waste, except for onion peels. There's absolutely no way they'll eat the onion peels. But they eat everything. Geese eat everything. Ta-da!
This is dyed with onion skins.
Wow. That is amazing, Emma. Yeah. And by the way, congratulations. You're the first person that has actually undertook a dyeing process with the Galway most people who are trying to resell or have ambition to resell have just stuck with the icru. Is that what you call it? The icru? Is that it? Yeah, white.
You call it bonine, don't you? Bonine.
Bonine, yeah. So having somebody invest your time, your energy, your love, your passion, your skill set into bringing those colours to life, it's just been a joy. Like I shared it on the Galway Sheep Farmers WhatsApp group, and the warriors was just, they were so thrilled. A lot of these people wouldn't be on Facebook or Instagram. Some of them don't even respond to the WhatsApp. But just the response was just amazing. Is that really our wool? Yes, it is. You know, they're thrilled, and they're a lovely bunch. And they almost, do you ever hear that expression about the way a dog looks like its owner? Well, the breeders here remind me of the breed. They're kind of docile, very laid back, hugely friendly, and that's the people that I'm working with, and that's why I've such admiration for the work that they've done over the 100 years, and I can't walk away from it now. I mean, like, my husband says to me, are we going on holidays this year? And I go, well, are we going before the Mehel? Because I won't be able to go before the Mehel because I've so much work to do. Right, we'll go after the Mehel. Well, then there'll be all the press stuff that we have to do. And then he goes, okay, can we go in September? And I can go, oh yeah, okay, maybe we'll be able to go in September. Like my year revolves around the Mehel. It's like as if I get married once a year, every year. I have to prepare, plan and organise for it. So it would be lovely to have you and to have the skeins with you, if possible, for the Mehel, because one of the things that happens a lot of people at times is I get a lot of people come visit the farm here and they're like, oh, can we buy the wool? And I'm kind of going, in the Greece you can. And if you want to buy a sheep, you can buy a sheep too. But like, we really need you, Emma, to be able to go forth. Words don't describe how impressed and how overjoyed I am to meet you, albeit it's on Zoom. It would be incredible to meet you in the person. I was actually in Fermanagh on Monday. I did a talk up there for the food and farming community that's part of DEFRA. There was 22 farmers interested in regenerative farming, and they're on a course been run over 3 years. And I was there speaking to them about biofibre as potential for regenerative farming and the benefits of growing biofibre as part of a regenerative farm system. So regenerative farming is akin to organic, except for they pay way more attention to field rotation and just it's almost, to sound silly, but it's almost more organic than organic farming.
Yes.
Yeah. So the regenerative farming course is on currently, and I was fortunate to be in Belle-Isle on Monday talking to those farmers. Yeah. And if they're the future is very, very bright. Yeah. And if you're the future is even brighter. And on that note, unless you have any more questions for me, I'm going to, have you anything else that you need to run by me?
Where can we find you on the internet if people want to follow along with what you're doing and what the Wool Co-op's doing?
www.galwaywool.ie, or you can get us on our Instagram, which is at the Galway Co_op. So I suppose I haven't got my driver's license for Facebook. I've crashed a few times on Facebook. I don't know the difference between my page and my profile. I'm just crazy when it comes to Facebook. People say, "No, you sent that out 3 times." I kind of go, "All right, did I?" I really need help on social media, but I think the Instagram or the website itself is probably the best place to reach out to us. And I think for me, the most important thing is to watch what you're doing, Emma, because you're the brightest thing that has happened to us. So for people to be able to actually watch what you're doing for us would be incredible, because seeing the product in yarn and where it needs to be, which is from land to the hand, follow that story online and we'd be thrilled, absolutely thrilled.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time. So we'll hopefully speak again sometime.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it already. And best of luck for March 17th. I hope it goes great.
Thank you. Bye.
Slán.